This is the MFG Monkey Podcast. We sit down with leaders and innovators in the industry to talk about manufacturing, business, and the stories behind their successes. I'm your host, Dustin McMillan, owner and founder of McMillan Co. Scott, welcome, buddy. How are you?
Great, thanks. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today, Dustin.
Yeah, no, thank you. As always, not as always, I guess, but more times than not, we have a little bit of technical difficulties trying to get two systems to link up. So we finally got connected and figured out a workaround, and now we're rolling. So
yeah, thanks for your patience there. I'm glad we're connected.
Yeah, no, you too. Well, tell everyone where you're at and company that you're with and all that fun stuff.
Sure. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm Scott Hoselton, president of ACS. We're a systems integration firm that are headquartered in just outside of Madison, Wisconsin. So, and then one of the Big Ten cities, like over where you're at, and and also we have an office up in Troy, Michigan, just outside of Detroit, focusing on the automotive market space. So we're 30 years old just this year. We've been around since 1994. About 125 people across our organization, and we really focus on delivering innovative and integrated test facilities for our core markets, which are automotive and aerospace.
That's great. Yeah,
we actually had.
No, I was just saying I jumped on your website, and it looks like you got a lot of fun stuff, fun machinery that you're integrating, things like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a big challenge, right? So we always have new demands, new requirements. Very infrequently do we get the same request twice. So our engineers love that variety,
right?
And the opportunity that provides, and our customers look for us to be flexible like that.
What if you can talk about, do you have a favorite project that you guys are working on right now, and if you have NDAs and stuff, I completely understand that as well.
I can talk about it at a high level.
Perfect.
Yeah, we have a fantastic project right now. It's the largest project we've ever won with one of our longest standing customers that have invited us back. We've worked with them. We're really kind of in the entry level stages of that project. It's exciting. It's the product that will be delivered out of that facility is really transformative, and the application of that product is really going to help a lot of folks. And we were able to come in and sit down with them and go through our delivery model and align it with their needs and move into an execution phase relatively quickly, which is really our core bread and butter.
Sure.
So yeah, it's a production facility that also includes test, and that those two realms include both of our areas of expertise.
Okay.
It's exciting. Yeah, it's one of our oldest customers as well, Dustin. So it was a great win.
Well, and that's always fun when you can work with the same customer on multiple projects. You have that rapport built already, and it's like working with a friend most of the time.
We were really lucky when we were hatched, if you will. Our first 4 customers were some names you'll recognize: Harley Davidson, John Deere, Cummins, Caterpillar, and we were 25 people that spun off of an engineering firm to do this type of work. And interesting thing about those guys is they're iconic American brands, and they treat their supply chain like they treat their customers. We really learned a lot, and and not only that, coming out of the gate, having those 4 names on your resume opened a lot of doors for us.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
To this day, those 4 customers are still our far largest customers.
That's fantastic. No, that stuff's a lot. We've been fortunate enough to provide different fabricated parts and machine parts and into those industries with conveyors, and there's a company in Michigan, it's escaping my name, but we did some fabricated parts for some automated systems and things like that, and it is fun being involved with those projects. So I'm sure you guys have a lot of fun with it. And you've been with the company for 21 years, and are you one of the founders? I never even asked that.
No, I'm not. I'm one of the earlier partners.
Okay,
so
awesome.
We invite people in to buy into the organization. Yeah, so I've been here quite a long time.
Yeah,
but we're a young company and full of young people as well. So
good.
I'm one of the old timers in that.
Well, probably fishing keeps you young. It was kind of funny when we first started chatting. You told a story about your what you just told me, your stepfather.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So it's always fun when I do these and I can connect with somebody on a personal basis, and you and I certainly did that right off the bat with one of your walleye stories. I think you should share that.
Oh yeah, it's a great story. I grew up in a small town in central Illinois, um, about 3 hours straight west of where you're at, and the grew up fishing with my family. And as we've gotten older in life, my brothers and I still get together and do things. A few years ago, my middle brother invited me to go along with our stepfather with about 20 other of our closest friends up to a great walleye lake in Canada. Probably heard of it, Loch Sewell. And guys had some great equipment, took the Ranger and Champion fishing boats all geared up with GPS, get up in the morning at 6:30 and take off and run 40 miles an hour, 40 miles up the river, up the lake, find the spot and catch fish until about 6:30 and come back. And my mom's husband, 82 at the time, I believe, took his boat and idled out around the point just so he couldn't see the lodge. So he felt like he was out in the middle of nowhere. And he had two conditions. He fished until he had his limit, or he finished the Magnum bottle of red wine. And it was a Magnum.
Yeah.
And first day, he fished all day because he said he was by himself. He couldn't drink all that wine. Second day, he invited me to go with him. And at first I was like, I wanted to go up river, up lake with these guys and run hard. But 6 days later, I didn't leave his boat. We got up, everybody was gone at 6:30. We got up around 9:30 and late breakfast, walked down to the dock, idled around the shore. He found an absolute fantastic spot. And I will say, I think out of the 6 days, I think 3 days we finished the wine before we caught the fish. And the other 3 days we caught the fish.
Right.
At any rate, we were back at the dock about 1:30. He was taking a nap about 2:30, and I was down by the lake in the Adirondacks here, either finishing the unfinished bottle of wine,
right,
or cracking a new one, waiting for the guys to get back at 6:30. And I have to tell you, one of the funnest weeks of my life to do it that way. We really had a good time.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing better than leaving after and getting back to the dock with a couple punch tickets before everyone else. So we as you can imagine, we probably didn't talk too heavy about that either. Yeah. No, that's we absolutely love fishing up here. You'll have to come down and do it sometime. It's probably a much different experience than what you guys have up there. But it's definitely fun. We're kind of winding up the season here and hoping to get a few more days out ourselves.
Sure. Yep. I'd love to do that. Thank you.
Yeah. So we jumping into it, I was really interested in talking to you because we're integrating a few new systems ourselves, and then we see it with customers and just really getting your insight on what you have seen both work really, really well when you're setting up a new line for somebody, or on the other end of the spectrum, what have you seen folks do that has been a total disaster?
Those are really good questions, and I'll go with the second one first because that'll lead into what we do. So a lot of times people, and it's just by nature, they get involved, getting ready to do a project, and they call who they know.
Right.
And they oftentimes know who the manufacturer of the equipment is. They know the local architect. Probably have a local constructor that they know well. And each one of those firms and each one of those entities has their own deliverables. And they all do a very good job in each one of those capacities. And the customer will procure the parts and pieces of a project in that manner. What happens, though, they have to manage it. And those are independent, disparate entities that work real hard to do what they do. In our types of projects, which are a heavy requirement for integration requirements between building systems and process systems, there's gaps in the scopes of supply. And so customers have to figure that out either live or ahead of time. That typically costs time, which, as you know, building these facilities, getting it up and running is the order of the day, as quick as possible.
Right.
And there's a budget. There's a scope. And so we were created really for certain types of projects initially, which were engine test facilities, to come in, do the design, and then we actually did it all in-house. We would define the equipment requirements. The customer would either give us a list, and we could either procure commercially, or we could build ourselves. We have our own manufacturing facility. We then hire the contractors. We do the data access systems, and we commission all under one purchase order. Okay. And it wasn't anything we thought of. It was the companies I mentioned earlier, Dustin, that said, hey, would you guys do it this way?
Right.
And so we learned along the way. It's an engineer, procure, construct model, EPC.
Okay.
with a turnkey responsibility. And what it really did is it married the gap. It shrunk the gaps. And so there's three things we go to market on. One is our technical expertise. Two is our flexible delivery. And the third is we don't leave until it works. And these facilities need to work.
Right.
The worst thing a customer could ever do is finish a project and not have it operational ready. That asset's sitting there paid for, and it's not making data, it's not making product. That's what we do. So out of those gaps from a traditional design bid build delivery, our model is created to really get rid of those gaps. And the customer can call us and we'll take care of the whole thing.
That's fantastic. So you guys literally are on the ground from conception. You're engineering it, you're helping design everything. I'm getting the input from, Harley's engineer or whatever, what they need, the components that it's doing, the rate that they need to hit, and you guys help them design the entire line, and then install, and then test it and make sure it works before you guys are gone.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And one of the unique things about our model is within that front end design, everybody's got a number, and they have to go get a number. They have to give it to their management team to get the project funded. And so oftentimes they were having to go too far downstream with design efforts before the project was funded, because they're making decisions on things that haven't been talked about yet to get funding, and it may not be required as their scope gets more defined. So we utilize a process called a front-end planning process, and it really takes that design to the first 15, 20%. We identify P&IDs, energy flow diagrams, systems architecture, space programming, and building infrastructure at a high enough level so we can get some numbers. Then we then turn that over to the customer and say, hey, here's your range. It's 2 to 5 million, it's 20 to 30, it's 40 to 80, whatever that confidence interval needs to be. They can go get their funding. If they get the funding they need, continue on with the design. We can turn that into final design, construct, commission. If it's out of the scope of the funding available in that fiscal year, we can table it, and they've spent 50 to 100 grand, and they're not down a path that they can't come back off of.
Sure.
Again, learned behavior. We stubbed our toe a few times, and that's kind of what we learned.
Yeah.
But it's a really good way for us to engage with the customer, for them to define the requirements. We call it a project charter, Dustin, and then all of the project stakeholders get together and sign it. So we all own the scope from the very beginning.
What kind of commitment are you asking for from your customer up front? I mean, it seems like you guys are doing a tremendous amount of work before the project's even approved.
Yeah, it depends on what they're going to do with that number or that scope. If they're going to go do a feasibility study and say, is it yes or no? We can do that very cost competitively. It's just hours times people. And if it's going to be more defined and they want to really go get a funded number, we'll advance those designs a little further and maybe to the 30 to 40% design level. And that's a little bit more of a commitment. We do an open book. And so if we don't spend the money, we don't charge the customer. And it's a very collaborative process as well. A lot of the, number one reason projects fail is the failure of the owner to adequately define the requirements. And we feel we're not doing our job if we're not asking you questions you haven't considered.
Sure.
It's our professional responsibility. So if we can do that, we can get that defined well enough, they can go forward and have a certainty of outcome than they wouldn't have had otherwise. So I'm going to tell you, about 85% of the time we call it a front-end planning effort, FEP. We do FEPs for our customers' capital projects.
Yeah. Well, and I can see if you have a group of newer engineers working on a project that have never been down this path before, they just don't know what they don't know. And I can see where your guys' process coming in, and that's what you do every day. You can really point out, 50 things or maybe 2 things that they just didn't think about at all. I mean, I personally, I was telling you, we're putting in a line, and there are 3 things we didn't even think about. And one was as simple as like running airlines. We were so focused on, the electric and multiple other things that we're like, okay, well, we haven't even talked to anyone to run all the airlines that we need to, operate the pneumatic part of the system. And I mean, it's not a game changer. It really doesn't affect the project, but it was a tiny detail that, we missed.
And you're not alone there. I mean,
Sure.
You have your day job, right?
Right.
You're not a capital project manager building projects all over the U.S. It's pretty normal. And oftentimes they can be really big issues, though, especially if you're looking at where you're going to put infrastructure and you don't have room. Or in today's economy and climate, the lead times on equipment if people aren't getting the electrical gear ordered early,
Mhm.
50, 60-week lead times, it can really impact their project schedule, and there's nothing you can do about it. So we try
Wow.
to talk about those things up front with customers and say, hey, what are your critical path items? Here's what we think they are. Let's marry the list together and see if we're aligned.
Wow, you guys are seeing 50-week lead times on some of the electrical components?
Yeah, and it's not, the build out of the electrical infrastructure for a variety of reasons
Mhm.
is really putting the pinch on those OEMs to develop and get that product shipped. And we don't see any foreseeable let up. It's just been the demand so high. And the good thing is you get your order in. It is what it is. You can plan around it. Bad thing is if you don't and you have requirements that are in front of that, you're kind of stuck.
Yeah.
And there's only a few people that do some of those things. And the nice thing about it, most of it's in the U.S. So you can really, that once they get it done, it's here quick. But yeah, it's one of the current challenges of doing these types of projects.
What other challenges are you guys seeing?
Yeah, some of the things that are kind of starting to reconcile are the labor shortage was a big deal a couple of years ago. We don't see that as much today.
Okay.
I think the people are back to work that want to be at work. I think that's going well. The pricing seems to have stabilized a little bit. A couple of years ago with we all know about the inflation numbers. And it wasn't just the inflation numbers, it was also the capacity issue. We were working in a couple of markets that we were foreign in. Phoenix, Arizona was one of them. And all the chip manufacturing that was going in down there,
Mhm.
the contracting and the custom equipment builders and the software folks were just full of work. And we had a large project that ended up going on hold, and it about doubled in cost over 4 months, solely due to capacity of the subcontracting market, and they didn't have any availability. So we had to travel further and further, and the price went up.
Yeah.
That seems to be stabilizing a little bit, though.
Yeah, and I would have to say, depending on what part of the country you're in, in Columbus, we are very fortunate that we have some giant projects going on, Intel being one of them that's over 100 billion or $100 trillion or something insane. Maybe it's 100 billion. After 100 billion doesn't like it's so big, but it demands so many subcontractors that uh it's just unbelievable. And then you have an EV plant for Honda going on just down the road off of 71. So it's incredible how many subcontractors though those two jobs alone pull in, and how it affects the housing market, outside of even the manufacturing market if somebody smaller wants to do a project. So definitely a very good point.
Yeah, that industrial manufacturing sector is very healthy. And people look at some of the build forecasts, and they're depending on what sector you're in, they can vary fairly dramatically. But industrial manufacturing, however you define that, it's building the chip plant, it's building a new EV plant. That's happening all across the U.S. Then you look at some of the data center projects. There's just some very highly technical projects that are currently underway, and they don't seem to be lighting up anytime soon.
No.
It looks like it's probably a 4 or 5 year run on that.
Yeah. And I had to look up, make sure my number, it was $20 billion project for Intel up to, they'll end up spending 100 billion. So nowhere near a trillion. I was wrong, very wrong. But man, these projects are just so big. And then we were at another DLA event last week, and the director of development of Ohio was talking about another project that could possibly be larger than Intel. And I would think that like the Intel project's got to be one of the largest projects in the United States, like in history. How big that, the infrastructure of all that is, with them putting in, everything from their own power plant to just the machinery that's going in. Are you guys involved with them at all? If you can talk about it.
Yeah, we've done some chip plants, but they're potato chip plants. Food and beverage stuff.
Yeah.
But no, we haven't been involved. It's obviously a market we're interested in.
Yep.
The challenges for those types of projects, and you're right, they are some of the largest projects ever let in the U.S. outside of the large dam projects and heavy civil projects back a long time ago.
Sure.
But the reality of that, there's only a few firms nationwide that can take on that kind of capability, that kind of project.
Yeah.
When you talk about those sizes, so you have JVs and partnerships.
Yep.
The good thing is our build sector in the U.S. is extremely capable, very technical, and the highest in the world, in my opinion. And so that segment's also really good at recognizing their strengths and their weaknesses. That's where our opportunity comes in, Dustin. So we would have an opportunity at projects like that where we'll call some of the enabling spaces.
Yep.
Might be some of the complicated mechanical stuff, maybe some of the testing systems, maybe some of the software, or some of the custom test equipment. That's where our come in. We would partner with a big builder to build the core and shell and do all the big infrastructure, because that's what they do, and they do it very well. And they can
Sure.
take the risk for $100 billion, if you will.
Right. What markets are you heavily concentrated in?
Very good. So automotive is our core market. And when we say automotive, we don't just say pass car. It's on and off highway. It's marine. It's anything that's moved by an external force.
Okay.
Then our second market that we've really hit pretty hard over the last 5 years is aerospace. And it was a natural transition for us. We could take the same skill sets from the automotive space and transition to the aerospace marketplace. Again, integration between heavy process and infrastructure and making things work. The difference between the two markets is the aerospace stuff spins and moves a little bit faster than the automotive.
Sure.
We've been successful there. And there, our SWAR diversification strategy, we grew up in the automotive space with the big diesel OEMs, as I mentioned. As we've looked to diversify our business, we looked for opportunities where we could apply the same resources and still have the same kind of deliverable with respect to add value. So the first strategy was, as we moved forward, was let's build more for the same. Let's build additional applications for the same customer base. So we have these customers we worked with for 30 years. How can we do more? So we're building custom test stands. We're doing abatement projects, complicated work still, high performance projects, but different than what we did in the past. Our second strategy was more customers in core markets. So we've grown in the automotive space. We opened the Detroit office. Ford is a very good customer of ours. It's been great to work with over the last 10 years. We're making progress in a variety of the tier one supply chain and other OEMs. Had a lot of success with some of the Japanese firms as well over the years in building tech centers. Then the next strategy for us, Dustin, was new market. And that's a lot more work and a lot more risk. And so when we decide who we want to be and where we want to be growing up, we're not changing our core strategy, but we're going to change our near-term strategies as required. And the markets we're looking at right now is really around industrial manufacturing, the reasons you just mentioned.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's a chip plant or if it's an EV plant or if it's a battery OEM. There's a lot of the same requirements in terms of integration. The challenge we have there is just the size and scale. Our largest project to date at ACS is right around $250 million, $250 million. So we can scale pretty good up to there.
Yeah.
These projects that you're talking about are, as you mentioned, are just absolutely monster projects. We would look to partner with some of the big CMs if those came about.
Yeah. Well, and you guys are very diversified with both what you do and the markets that you're in, and it's interesting just to hear about how you've scaled up over the years, and certainly the growth that you've seen being there for as long as you've have. You want to talk about the different services that you guys offer and what you guys really excel in there? I know that we talked about everything from design to turning the machines on and making sure they work, but specifically, I think you mentioned earlier that you guys are doing some internal manufacturing for some of the components.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 6 internal teams, and they were all built around the requirements of these types of projects. So as you mentioned, we have an internal facility design team, mechanical, electrical, piping engineers that work here. We either buy designs from engineering partners or execute ourselves based on the need of that specific project. If we have a unique skill set that an engineering firm that has a big, long resume there, we would partner with them. We still manage it. We still own the risk that they would execute. We have an internal design team that does a lot of the work. Other than that, we have that internal project management group, more of a traditional construction manager type roles where you have project managers, construction managers, and site supers and safety folks. That's an internal team. Then we get a little different. And so those would be 2 entities that a lot of firms would have that like to build buildings. From there, we go to integration engineers. And those are our guys that write specifications for equipment sourcing, or they put together commissioning and integration plans for installing that equipment. They get involved in the space programming, the layout, the throughput, the utilization factors. We can do that very quickly and very cost effectively. Then we go into a controls group where we design and build a lot of PLCs, programmable logic controllers, to control processes, or as safety intermediaries, working with people like Rockwell and Siemens and others as partners there. And we do that as a component of our own projects, or is a standalone controls deliverable? That marketplace gets wider when we talk about those guys. Then we go into that machine design and build group. We have a group of machine builders and designers where they are mostly mechanical guys that design and build custom equipment. That's where everybody has fun here. That's the everlasting gobstopper machine.
Yeah.
You know, where, what is this? How do you determine what this is? And most of the stuff we do is pretty complex, pretty unique. Our biggest competitor there is oftentimes the customer doing it themselves because they always have. We can come in and be cost competitive, do it quicker, and maybe provide some more functionality because we have a broader range of expertise, and we can develop opportunities there. And then our last group is our newest group, which is our software team. And we started this group about 3 years ago at the request of customers to do kind of more flexible open source software solutions for data acquisition systems. And so we work on it with a National Instruments based program called LabVIEW, or language called LabVIEW, and we create open source solutions for customers where we sell it, teach them up, and own it and give it to them, and they own it from there. And that's probably our fastest growing group, especially in this day and age of automation, where everybody's turning on machines. And that group also includes an automation arm. We've installed a couple of robots here in the last 6 months for high production, high volume manufacturing facilities because of our expertise in integration.
Sure.
So that's really the 6 groups that we have.
Okay. Yeah, that's fantastic. The projects just, I'm kind of cruising around on your website here while we're talking, and some of the projects that you have pictures of in the aerospace and the automotive industries are pretty cool, right? What is your guy? www.acscc.com. When you guys are listening, to get on and jump on here and see what they're doing. What's one of your favorite projects that you've done, and what industry was it in?
Yeah, so you know what? I'm like you. I came out of the BD world.
Okay.
And so I like them all. But there's a few that were really technically challenging, and they were hard to finish. And we finished them when they worked, and the customer was really happy at the closure. One of those was an altitude chamber for a diesel OEM a few years ago. And it was hard. They were asking us to do some things that really hadn't been done before for a budget that certainly hadn't been done before.
Sure.
And we signed up for it, and we worked together. And one of the proudest moments of ACS that I've had was a year after that project was complete, there was a trade show, technical trade show in that city. And one of the tours was through our test facility that customer hosted. And they talked glowingly about the work that they had, that they were able to do in the facility that we built. So we're kind of like the BASFs of the world. You don't know us, you just know some of the stuff that you buy was developed on machines and systems and facilities that we built.
Sure.
And it was a really great moment because it was challenging. And it delivered, again, like we talked about, the functional performance requirements that they wanted. Since then, we've had a couple of projects. I would say a lot of projects that have been very unique. And one of our favorite customers came to us a few years ago and said, "We only call you guys if the budget's unattainable and the schedule can't be met internally, because then we know we can work with you to figure it out." And part of that is we have an unemotional attachment to the project. We're not going to work there forever, so we can come in and ask hard questions and sometimes give hard answers. But that's what our customers ask us for. Most of our favorite projects at ACS are built around technical complexities that we haven't seen before. A few years ago, we got involved with a local firm. UW's here in Madison, like you got OSU and the OSU down in Columbus. And so we have a lot of research going on here.
Yeah.
And there was a guy working on nuclear fission projects, and we got involved with a nuclear fuel rod handling system for that. That wasn't in our chase. We weren't looking for that. We just met some local people, and we have a very technical group of folks. And we built, I think, 2 of those systems. That was great. That was crazy. Radar array systems for the military. I got to stay kind of high level with some of this stuff because NDAs.
Sure. Yep.
But we get involved in a lot of R&D work, Dustin, and so it's fun. Guys get involved with projects where the product's not on the market yet, and so we're building something for things that nobody's seen before.
Yeah.
And that's probably the most exciting. As you know, though, with your business development background, the greatest successes here at ACS, from my perspective, are when we get invited back.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And the fun thing that I hear about your guys' culture, it's not, can it be done or not? It's how the hell do we figure it out and make it happen? And that's always been something for me in the business development world is identifying a problem and figuring out a solution, how to get it done. And there's so many companies out there that if it doesn't fit inside their little box, they walk away from it. And I think that people are missing out on huge opportunity where, they have somebody come and they're like, hey, we need you to do this. And there's a ton of companies out there that say, oh, that can't be done. Or it's going to be too involved or whatever. And the great thing about you guys is you're like, yeah, let's figure that out. Now, if we can figure it out in your budget or not, that's a different answer. But we'll push it to the limit and see if we can get there.
That's a great comment. We try to say yes if, yeah.
Yeah.
And so our BD guys bring back qualified opportunities to our operations team. Our operations guys, hand in hand with our BD team, reviews those from a technical perspective, from a commercial perspective, and from an execution perspective. Okay, yeah, we can do this. I can tell you that it's been very rare when we said no.
Mm-hmm.
The no's come out of capacity issues, not about capabilities issues.
Yeah.
And so if we can't do it because we're busy, we're not going to oversell.
Yeah.
These are projects our customers really need. But very rarely do we say no because of the technical risk. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, most of our guys get kind of fired up when they see the real challenging projects come in.
Oh, I bet.
For the same reasons you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And the flip side of that too, that doesn't happen unless you have a great team.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, we have a fantastic team here. Really bright engineers that are really conscientious, that try to do the right thing. They're empowered. They can make decisions on behalf of our firm in front of the customer the second day they're here.
Yeah.
So we put a lot of trust in them.
Yeah.
We're going to live with the mistakes. At the end of the day, we got a better team because of it. And I think one of the greatest, I heard this a month ago. We had a customer up here, and you know this in your industry, there's a lot of smart people out there. Every
Mm-hmm.
firm's full of a lot of smart people. He told us, and this doesn't sound humble saying this, like it's kind of gonna, but he told us that they liked us because of the humility of our team.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of smart people in the company they work with, but nobody was ever that guy or that sharpshooter in that question. It was all about working together.
Yeah.
And this project was in flux. We were kind of working through some things to define the requirements so they could go get it funded. So a lot of emotional discussions about, do you really need this?
Yeah.
Or is your number real? Or did you really go get that quote? And our guys worked through it with them, and the project's going to get funded. And it looks like it's going to be a major win for them to get their project funded. And it was all about, we start off every meeting with our value statement, and our values are all about how we want our people to behave. And if you hire the right culture, you don't have to worry about that. In fact, the new people make your firm better from the first day they're here. We're really big believers in that.
Yeah. And that was the thing going through my head the entire time that you were talking is it is all about your culture and there are a lot of really smart people out there. There are a lot of companies with a lot of smart people. And if their culture isn't what you guys have, it doesn't matter how smart the people are. If they're not working together and figuring it out together, and working together and feel like a family. My buddy next door neighbor, his company DEM, they do wire harnesses in Chagrin Falls, and I'm fumbling and rambling here because I'm trying to find the book that he told me to read. The Culture Code, great book. I don't know if you've heard or read that one yet, but they talk a lot about what you're talking about in the book, just case studies on different cultures and what drives good culture and the whole book based upon just people feeling, like their family within an organization and that they belong there. And it certainly sounds like you guys have that.
Well, we did a transformative thing 3 years ago. And we have a group of shareholders that are all working partners. And so they have to be working in the business. You can't be not here and own part of the company. And it was transition. And we're preparing for transitions all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we went off site for 2 days and 2 nights and worked on some really key things. And it was all about breaking relationships down,
right,
and getting closer with one another and becoming more vulnerable so you could trust each other. And a couple of things came out of that. We first talk about reading business books, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Lencioni.
Okay.
I don't know if you've read that.
I have not. I will.
Great book. If you have a team and it goes through the different personalities of the team members and how they add value or actually subtract value. And you go through an exercise there called personal histories. And it gets pretty emotional. People stand up in front of the group and talk about where they came from, how they got here, and what's their biggest strength of the team, what's their biggest weakness. And it's kind of hard when you're sitting there and your business partners in your circle, and this is before you have the beers, and starts telling you what you don't do well. And especially when it's when it's a consensus. And but what it did was drive a lot of really good behaviors coming out of it.
Yeah.
So we got through all of that, and people felt really broken down and vulnerable, and had these personal relationships to start to grow that weren't there before. And it transitioned into the second year where we really got into the guts of our business. And we worked on the opening discussion of our second year was about what makes a great year. And 8 entities filled that out. And the consistencies between one box and the other were amazing. And I don't think if we wouldn't have done that the year before, we're get more vulnerable, more close to one another, I think we would have still been 8 different versions of the same answer.
Yeah.
And then we took that exercise and took it into a keep, stop, start chart. And we looked at financial performance, business development, technology, relationships, and we went through that and went, a matrix, and we developed a working business strategy for that year based on what do we need to be doing, what should we start doing, what do we stop today. And it really worked out well. Took some time, and in between that, we shot some guns, rode some go-karts, went to a comedian, went to a ball game on those off. So we had some time together to relax. But pretty good meetings and pretty good discussions.
Yeah, when you have a leadership teams that understands humility and vulnerability, and you can lead from that stance, it changes the dynamic of the company, and your team is willing to be that way as well. And it, especially with, I think what you guys do is, real problem solvers, and going in and they can carry that into a meeting with a customer, and can be, humble and vulnerable in front of a customer, and work along with them. It just has to build a rapport on a different level.
It really does. Our customers are smart. We learn so much from them every time we work with them. But we need that ability to come in and provide solutions. And our team needs to have the self-confidence to put themselves out there.
Yeah.
Because they're going to walk in sometimes and the customer is going to say, I don't like that idea. And it can't be catastrophic. Okay, let's go back to the drawing board and do something else. That's what we found, is that these discussions about empowerment have driven a lot of good autonomous behavior.
Yeah.
And self-confidence and the ability to take risks. It's kind of cliche, you've heard it, but we win together and we lose together.
Yep.
Every football coach says that every Friday morning.
Yeah.
But that's what we do too. We hold each other accountable for success and failure, but we're not going to berate each other.
Yep.
Our business is going to get better when we fail,
yep,
and it's going to get better when we win. So, but along the way, it's all flowery when we start talking about. There's challenging discussions, certainly, because it's accountability, and without that, we wouldn't have anything.
Yeah. Well, and you brought up something else that's very important, and having those great relationships. Going out and riding go-karts together and shooting guns and drinking a few beers, and that it really brings people together, and you become family, you become friends when you're doing those activities.
We went through some training externally here, and we're still doing it, with customers, and it was communications training.
Okay.
And it talked about 5 components of that, and really the first component was build a relationship, because if you don't have the trust, and that takes time, right? You can never tell somebody trust me. First thing you do when somebody says trust me is check my back pocket.
Right.
But we have to put the time up front, and then from there, though, we step into understanding what drives their need or their pain, and then we talk about understanding their decision-making process, fulfilling the order, and then the follow-up. And it sounds like it's not a fixed sales process. It's a good communication strategy about getting connected, staying connected, fulfilling on your promises, and then following up with them. And with a lot of engineers, I know you have a lot of technical folks in your businesses, communication skills aren't what they went to college for. They're problem solvers.
Right.
So we give them some tools to focus on, and they're really they're really good. They're not phony. They're really tools that people can utilize in personal and professional relationships to have better conversations.
Yeah.
And it's really been successful for our firm, because I think people feel empowered now to ask questions, and they might not have been before.
Yeah.
You know how it goes. You come into a meeting sometimes and everybody's quiet, and you got to drive the whole conversation. And you walk out of there saying that really wasn't worth any time. A week later, somebody comes in and one of the people drive, they ask, all they do is ask tough questions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tough in the moment, but then you walk out and say everybody feels very energized because they got some answers.
Yeah.
We really try to empower that behavior internally and externally.
And that's such a great point that you make, that, people go to school for whatever their craft is, and an electrical engineer or a mechanic, and I'm picking on engineers right now. You can say do the same thing with accountants and CPAs and all that. They go to school to master that craft. They don't come out with, uh, personal skills, which is, maybe something that our educational system is missing, and it gets put onto us to help people with those skills. And I know, as a young person, probably one of the things that I did the most to understand myself was doing the disc profile test. I remember that test being transformational for me, because I want like to. There's sometimes I like to know all the details, but I'm a very high D, and there's sometimes I don't give a shit about the details. I just want to know that we're going to get there. I care less how we
I
get
was
there.
gonna hope. I was hoping you would ask me to guess. I was going to say you're a DI.
Oh,
And
yeah, high D. Yeah, high D.
I'm a high I. I'm
Okay.
a real high I. And in
Yep.
fact, that profile has been so successful for our firm
Yeah.
in learning how to talk to one another
Absolutely.
that we actually look at the profiles of new hires, and also as we promote folks into leadership roles, making sure we get all four of those quadrants represented in our management team.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is. It's transformational, because if you can understand the other person and what's important to them intellectually, you're going to understand why they don't want to know all the detail, and you can push back that, and you're not trying to force it on them. And then the people, the S's and the C's that they're asking questions that they already know the answer to. You learn not to be uh defensive about that. You're like, why the hell are you asking me that question? You know the answer. You're like, oh, well, that's just their personality. They want to, you know, they just want to confirm it in their own head, or whatever. But it was very transformational for me.
We're full of C's here with our engineers.
Yeah.
And I call cold and calculating instead of conscientious.
Yeah.
But what it is, they're detail oriented. They want to see the spreadsheet, and you know what? That's the perfect attitude for the role they're in. If they get involved in these complex projects, they're doing design. We need people to get into the details and really, measure twice before they cut once.
Yeah.
And that's so we really look to hire into that group for the roles that we have.
Well, and for you guys, I can only imagine the bombs that you're building for these different projects. I mean, there's so many moving pieces and parts, and understanding every widget and every you know inch of wire and every wire nut that's needed. It's an incredible amount of detail.
Oh, it is, and we have to have those guys have to be willing to go out on a limb to defend their design.
Yeah.
I can give you 100 examples of that. A recent example of not of that C-level, but of that empowerment. We have a project that's an aerospace project. The customer wants us to do it. It's pretty tight time frame. We're fortunate to have a good backlog right now, and so we're very cognizant of our lead times. And so when we have lead times, we try to farm out some of the stuff that's the more lower commodity stuff. We have a lot of machine shops in the area that we can work with, partner, and we have over the years. But this young engineer has been here 2 years. He went to our operations manager for our manufacturing facility and said he wanted to outsource a certain component of this test system. And the young engineer said, "We can't outsource it. It's not a component that we can take out. It needs to be designed and built here in house." Nobody challenged him. We double checked to make sure we couldn't. It was the right answer. We moved on.
Yeah.
And I thought that's exactly what we're looking for. Someone that has the wherewithal and the knowledge to make that call, and the courage and the empowerment and the to be able to do it.
Yeah.
And there's a combination of our culture, of that personality style, and their role here that have all combined to make that happen.
Yeah, and that built that young individual's confidence tenfold. And the next time he's, when he brings a bigger problem to the table, he's going to do it, and people are going to trust him, and he's going to trust himself, and that's another thing that this book talks about, is just giving almost unlimited authority to anyone to bring any challenge to the table, or challenge anyone within the company, whether it's or an accountant, or whatever. If they see a problem, bring it to the table, and if you're right, then damn, thanks for catching that. And if you're wrong, then let's all learn from it, and move on. But nobody should feel like they're limited in their authority to challenge a problem.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think you buy a good tool, you better use it. Don't keep it in the tool shed.
Yeah.
You better have it there in the garage floor using it. And that's kind of how we look at our people. our best investment year over year is back in our staff,
Yep.
without a doubt. And we have KPIs. Everybody has KPIs here in their
Sure.
business too, but we have KPIs we measure our staff by and our success for that year.
Mm-hmm.
And number one, safety, customer satisfaction, community engagement. But then we also go into revenue and sold net profit and turnover. And if we really think about those components, it kind of stretches all across the impact that each one of our employees can have in the success of the business that year. And so we tried to create those so everybody in the team can say, I impact that KPI in this way.
Yeah.
They all have a way. So there's ownership. And,
Yep.
and again, it just kind of ties in with the other things we talked about with respect to culture. We work really hard to do that, whether it be on the sales side or the execution side or the internal dynamic.
Right. I would have to go on a limb and guess that your sales folks and your production and engineering folks get along pretty well.
They do. And it's funny when they don't there's a natural tension between sales and ops, right?
Oh yeah.
And
Yep.
you wear both hats, I think, right now. But there's a natural tension because one guy's trying to sell everything, the other guy's got to build it.
Mm-hmm.
And but you know what? They've earned each other's trust along the way. And we just had this conversation about lead times because we're busy right now, but our sales guys still have sales goals that haven't been met. So they're pushing. And we had this discussion, and we got our sales guys to say, in the years that they've been here, operations has never not responded when they said they were going to. Our ops guys will stay nights and weekends to write proposals. And then, as a smaller firm, we have a proposal team, but a lot of our operations folks have to write proposals themselves. They're going to execute. That's just how we're set up. And so they have to stay sometimes nights and weekends to get those things done. And they always do. And so that level of respect between the two groups is very high.
Yeah.
I will say some of our sales guys, and it's the nature of the role, are unrealistically optimistic at times.
Sure.
They guarantee the job's coming in on October 28th if we get it out today.
Yeah.
And then we find out October 28th, it's actually October 28th of 2025.
Right.
That might raise some concern.
Sure.
But you can't fault the enthusiasm, right? And so they do. They get along pretty darn good.
Well, and coming from a more of a sales background and an ops background for myself, if you're not asking the right questions and they just say, October, and you as a salesperson, it's October of 2024. And they're like, no, October 2025. But even, things do change. We have a customer right now that we were supposed to start doing things, start moving some of their lines into our facility 2 months ago, and things happened internally. And now it's going to be hopefully a first quarter 2025 project. And it's just a lot of communication. And I think for your customer to feel comfortable with communicating that to you, it makes all the difference in the world. And if you're planning on it to be right now, because that's what you were told, and then things change for them internally, and they're, they don't feel that they can tell you that things have changed because, they feel bad or whatever. That can be a huge difference in an organization just gearing up. And when it doesn't happen, it could, it hurts. But if your customer feels that they have the confidence that they can come and say, hey, we had something happen. We can't really tell you what it is, but we've got to push for 3 months. You're like, hey, whatever, we'll be here for you when when you're ready. I think that's a huge rapport builder with customers as well.
Oh yeah. And we're, in really today's economic climate, we've seen a lot of delayed decision making.
Mm-hmm.
Things haven't gone away. They're just moving slower.
Yeah.
And I think it's become kind of systemic. I don't think it's necessarily tied to current economic climate. I think it's kind of how companies are going to make decisions moving forward. The rapid advancement of technology, you really got to check what you're doing. You make a decision today and say, yes, heck, 6 months from now it might be an obsolete decision. So people are constantly kind of going back and checking, is this the right thing to do? Is it still the right thing to do? Okay, go.
Yeah.
And it's hard as a firm not to get frustrated. If you're the services provider for that solution, and we've had, I think the record, we just had this kind of sarcastic joke over our last partner meeting was about what's the longest opportunity that's been in our CRM that didn't convert. It's still not closed out. We have one that's 11 years old, and the customer's still there. And they still want to do it.
Yep.
When the timing's right. So we haven't closed. We're going to be there.
Yeah.
Like you just said, it's hard not to get frustrated. we don't put it in our, it's got a low go get ratio on it, of course,
Yeah.
but it's still in our CRM. It's a developing opportunity.
Yeah.
And, because it's not always the individual's fault. Sometimes the corporate strategy changes and it may come back. On the flip side, we've had projects come back that we thought were long gone.
Oh yeah.
And said, thanks for staying connected. We'd asked if we could update our pricing because it's been a little bit of time. But
yeah.
It typically works if you stay connected, right? And if you're doing the right thing and you stay connected, those opportunities come around.
Yeah.
It may not be the exact same one that we initially talked about. It's another one.
Yep.
So we really believe we believe very strongly in that. And our biggest project in the history of our firm was uncovered by some of our team making phone calls to guys they hadn't talked to in a year.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, hey, we'd like to talk about this project, and could you do this? And it was just staying connected. Dustin, that's all it was.
Yep. I totally agree. Just it could be as simple as something as, hey, we did this the other day. We had a company that was going to move all their warehousing and kitting and distribution to us, and we worked with them for, I don't know, 4 or 5 months to get it all to the table. And they were a German-owned company, and they took everything to corporate, and corporate shut it. They pulled the ripcord, and the lady she was also embarrassed to tell us, and we were like, hey, it's not, we understand, yeah, we just put in 4 months of work or 5 months of work or whatever, but we get it. And when you review it in 2 years, if you can build a case for us to do that for you in 2 years, then come to us. And if not, then that's okay too. But it gives us a reason to reach out and just touch base with their team every 6 months or however long. And I agree with you. When those opportunities come back along, or another opportunity with the same company, it's now they almost that customer may feel some sort of an obligation just because of how you handled it. And I've seen it in a different way, working for a company where upper management was pissed and they let the customer know, and now the customer's offended and they're like, we would never work with you guys ever again. Why would you make us feel that way? And it's an old school mentality. But it is what it is. We learn as we get older.
Yeah, we did. I read this book once on wisdom, and it was interesting, really interesting. The author interviewed a bunch of 70-year-olds across all walks of life in the U.S. So politicians, laborers, authors, school teachers, across all entertainers. Some people you heard of, most people you hadn't. And the number one result of that survey was knowledge is really based on experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about wisdom. Wisdom is based on experience. And then they went to the Eastern world and asked those cultures what the definition of wisdom was. And it was one of the things I just came to my mind in the comment. They said, well, if you're still alive and you've had your eyes open and not been a complete knucklehead the last 70 years, you're going to have some wisdom just by proxy. Real wise person is how they use it, discreetness. It's not the wisdom gain; it's how you use the wisdom you've learned over the years. I think that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Right? It really is.
That's a good point.
The older we get, how do you apply? It's like a good engineering. It's how you apply the knowledge you have. Because reading a textbook, we can all figure that out. Whether it takes you a month, a year, or a decade to learn it, but the real good problem solver can apply what they've learned really well.
Yeah.
And the problem is I don't apply that at home as well as I do at work.
That's a whole different conversation. Yeah, we could have a whole nother episode on things that we do at work that we should do at home. But
yeah, it's not the truth.
it is amazing how we can do things almost better at work than we do at home in a personal standpoint. And my Visage team, we talk about that quite often. And that you want to talk about humility and being vulnerable, that group will humble you and make you more vulnerable than what you ever thought you could be in a group of peers. But yeah, you gotta work just as hard on your personal life as you do on your business life. And if you don't, I believe that your work life or your professional life will it'll stifle because of that if you're too lopsided. And I say that from personal experience.
Yeah, likewise. It's not sustainable, right? You
Right.
got to be happy in what you're doing, who you're doing it for, and who you're with,
Yep.
long term.
Yep.
Otherwise, you're going to be you're not going to. I don't think you reach your potential. I just read a book on what the 5 key focal points of running the business are.
Okay.
And I'll just real quick. And some of the things, it's vision's the first thing. Know what you want, and how to get there. Number 2 is cash. You don't have any money, you don't have any business.
Right.
So knowing where it's going, how it's coming in, how it's going out, really important. The 3rd was people. Build the best possible team and surround yourself with them. 4th was learning, stay relevant, be disruptive. And the last one, which is what we talked about a lot this afternoon, is those relationships. Know them, own them, and be engaged.
Yep.
And that's the part sometimes for me at home, I'm not as engaged as I'd like to be. It's because you work all day and you come home. I have 3 kids. They're still around the house. And sometimes I just want to check out. Last night, my son wanted me to act out a movie scene with him. At 9:30.
Yeah.
Guardians were still playing the Yankees and watching the baseball game. The last thing I wanted to do, but it meant a lot to him. So I went downstairs and let him beat me up for about 20 minutes. And
right.
Limped back upstairs.
Yeah.
I think those things are very important, and all of them equally important to be successful, whether you're running the business or part of the business.
Yeah. Well, and to the listeners, we've cited quite a few books and sayings and things like that. We'll have all of this in the transcript that we post on our website. We'll also have it. We do a blog of the podcast. We'll have these books and some of these things in the blog posts as well, and we'll share them online on LinkedIn and things like that. So you're listening, don't feel like you have to go back and write all these things down. Feel free to visit the MFG Monkey website. It's just mfgmonkey.com, and it'll take you there, and you can find the transcript of the podcast. We also have it in the description on the podcast. So whatever you're listening on, if it's Apple or Spotify or one of the 900 other platforms that you can listen to us on, it'll be in the description. Same thing with Scott, with your contact information. Why don't you tell everyone how they can get a hold of you, your website? We'll have this in the description and all the other places as well.
Sure. Thanks, Dustin. Yeah. You can just actually go to our website, which is www.acfcm.com. And there's a variety of ways you can reach out to us through the website. My last name's kind of long. I'm not going to try to spell it. If you reach out to us through the website, I'll get the email.
Perfect.
Through working with Emily and Amanda here in our offices.
Okay.
And love to have you reach out and love to follow up with anybody that might have an interest. And honestly, Dustin, I really appreciate your time today. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, it was fun.
Really was. It made me think a little bit.
Yeah, no, it was definitely fun, and that's why I started doing this, back in 2020, and it was right before COVID, and it was just because my buddies and I would talk about this stuff all the time, and then it grew into like folks like your team reached out to us, and now that's really how every guest is on our on the podcast now, is just people reaching out. So I'm can't be more thankful of that people are find the value in what we're doing, that they come on and they want to be part of the conversation, and selfishly I learn a ton from each guest that comes on. So it's it's kind of my education and the way to keep things going up in my brain and not get stagnant. So I love it.
No, you do a great job at it. It's been very, very interesting, and I really enjoyed this today.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. I appreciate you coming on.
You're welcome, man. Then I'd reach out to you about that walleye trip.
Yeah, no, do it. I would like to get up to Wisconsin as well and do a whole different kind of fishing. So I actually fished Ashtabula last week and did some steelhead fishing early season. So, which was
nice.
Yeah, I usually go when it's cold as hell out, and it's fun. The fish don't fight near as hard. I land a whole lot more in March than what I do in September or October, but those things are crazy. If you've never fly fish for a steelhead in a river, man, that's they rock it out of the water.
I know we're running up against it, but I fly fished for steelhead with my brother-in-law a few years ago on the west side of Michigan.
Yep.
A beautiful little small river.
Yep.
It was about a 20-degree day, and I had a leak in my waders. which is another story.
Yeah.
I hooked a nice steelhead, and our guide, he got caught underneath a tree. And about 40 minutes, I was trying to get him out, and we didn't want to damage the fish.
Right.
So I kind of got close, and we took a picture like as much as we could. Then we just pulled the hook.
Yeah.
But that was probably the funnest, most rewarding fish that I never caught.
Yeah. 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 I have a trip that I didn't even hook a fish or stick a fish out in Oregon, and it was one of the most memorable trips that I went on. And we were on a drift boat, and we were going over class 3s, whitewater rafts, and we would go over a class 3, and the guide would paddle us back in, and he was trying to tell me where to go, and it was all I could do to cast a 10-weight rod out in Oregon on a boat after 4 or 5 hours. I was absolutely beat, but fun stuff for sure.
Yeah.
All right, man.
A great trip.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, and we'll have to do this again and figure out a different subject maybe.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Talk soon.
Yep. Thanks everyone for joining us for this episode of MFG Monkey. If you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes, please email them to us at info@mfgmonkey.com.